What's happening, folks? Welcome back to Deckard Unicorn. My name's Martin.
And my name's Shonagh.
So it's Halloween week and there's some spooky goings on.
But Martin, if there was an unusual occurrence in your immediate vicinity, who would you telephone? Ghostbusters!
You'd probably slide into their DMs these days, wouldn't you?
That's true, actually. Tweet them.
Hashtag phantasm.
Hashtag we're ready to believe you. But it would just be all like people on their Facebook complaining publicly that they hadn't returned their call and stuff.
I've still got a class 5 full roaming vapour flying about my house, mate. Yeah, so if you haven't guessed, we're going to be looking at 1984's Ghostbusters, directed by Ivan Reitman, and starring Dan Aykroyd, Bill Murray, Harold Ramis, Sigourney Weaver, Rick Moranis, Annie Potts, Ernie Hudson, William Atherton, and a bunch of other people too.
It's actually an awesome cast, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, this is one of the greatest comedy casts ever assembled, really, actually. So
it's one of the best films ever. Like, I'm not even gonna pretend not to absolutely love this film. I think this review is going to be a lot of me talking about things that I love, and I know we said before that we needed to start doing some films that aren't great, and there's probably going to be
happened.
No, I know, and there's probably going to be a lot of you out there who are like, this film is terrible, but this film has a really special place in my heart.
Yeah, and mine too. This is one of the first films I've ever seen on VHS.
Yeah, this is probably one of the first films that I ever recorded from the telly.
With all the adverts.
Absolutely.
Did you put a bit of tape over the corner?
Yeah, I have.
So you could record on your
It's
tape?
always at the very last second though, like you'd hit record and then nothing was happening, and then you had that panic moment where the tape ejected itself because the wee tab was cut off and you had to frantically find a bit of tape to cover it, and then you missed the start, and then forever you thought the film started like 5-10 minutes after it actually did.
The struggle was real.
I know. Kids these days will not
so
know.
If the ionization rate is constant for all ectoplasmic entities, we could really bust some heads. In a spiritual sense, of course.
So the story was the brainchild of Dan Aykroyd, who actually has a really strong interest in like the paranormal and spiritualism and things like that. I think there's a lot of family background. I think there were some psychics and some people who had an interest in, I don't know if you would say the occult, but certainly supernatural and spiritual happenings.
I definitely think they were interested in the occult as well, you know, like as you said, spiritualists, mediums, psychics, all that kind of thing. But you know, ghosts and ghouls, things that go bump in the night. His family had clearly had a major interest in that. I think his dad wrote books on it. He clearly has a very healthy interest in that side of things, and you can tell by the script there's so much detail in it as far as this alternate history that they build up in the story, where the background you have this idea of the evil Shandor, you know, Gozer worshipper. He's constructing buildings that are like conduits, gateways to another dimension. All that stuff makes the script really rich.
Yeah, I think the original script was a lot darker, definitely less of a children's film.
Yeah,
there was supposed to be like interdimensional travel and time travel and things.
Yeah, that's when Belushi was still attached to it, as far as he was concerned. You know, he was writing it for Belushi and I think Eddie Murphy as well, and that was going to be the story, was like they travelled through time, travelled through dimensions, but the effects budget, when they looked at the shots that they would need to actually facilitate that, it was going to cost way too much, so they had to start paring it back. So I think that's when Harold Ramis comes aboard and he starts having a go at it as well. You know, he's a really tight screenwriter, and yeah, they sort of made a lot of changes and got it down to, you know, a more workable script. But I think it's when they finally went to Aykroyd's place in Martha's Vineyard, where the three of them, Dan Aykroyd, Harold Ramis, Ivan Reitman, I think Bill Murray as well, they all sort of clubbed together to try and get a more workable script. So I think within 2 weeks they had enough of a script to start shooting.
Which is just as well, because they only had like a year, just over a year, to get this film off the ground.
Well, that's it. And given the incredible amount of effects and everything they had to pull together for this, it's kind of crazy that it actually got done in that period. You know, that's a really condensed time period to hit the release window they were looking for, which was like, I think it was June or July, wasn't it, in 1984. So there was a hell of a lot of stuff to be done in that period. And thankfully they had a really good effects team. I think Richard Edlund created his own team at that time, because at ILM, I think, where they were busy.
Was it one of the...
I think it was Temple of Doom they were doing.
It was,
I think they were working on an Indiana Jones movie, and so they couldn't do it, and they were really the only company at the time who were able to sort of carry out something that big. But Richard Edlund had worked with Spielberg before. He's obviously worked in Star Wars and things like that as well. So yeah, he was given some money to put together a crew, and they were thankfully able to put it all together, pull it out of the bag.
And they really did.
They certainly did. They've got some crazy talent in there as well, like Steve Johnson, the guy we talked about last week as well. So really talented people involved in that.
So what we got in the end was a very different film from what was probably first conceived by Dan Aykroyd.
I think it was, quite a big departure, but the core idea stayed the same. Essentially guys who could trap ghosts.
Yeah.
They used their technology and their brains to find a way to sort of trap these entities and store them.
I think the original idea still sounds like a film that I would like to see.
I think the third Ghostbusters movie they were talking about for years before Harold Ramis passed away, they were going to do an interdimensional thing where they think the Ghostbusters were going to go to hell and all these various things. So there was an idea there to sort of take it to that level, like different dimensions, different planes, maybe even time travel, something along those lines, but obviously never came to fruition because Harold Ramis passed away. And the game itself, the Ghostbusters game that came out for like the PS3, PS4, but I just recently played it again on the PS4 and everyone who loves Ghostbusters lore considers that the third film because that's kind of the story he wanted to tell. That's the last time the cast were together as well because the voice cast are all there, the original members. So it's kind of like lightning in a bottle that, it's been captured, a time capsule for all time. And sadly we just didn't get another film with Harold Ramis in it.
I wonder if next year's film, Afterlife, if that'll take that kind of turn.
Yeah, possibly. There's an idea that Harold Ramis might make some kind of appearance, whether it's some kind of spirit or being or, these kind of things where obviously it won't be him physically, but there'll be some kind of representation of him, of Egon. I'd really like to see that. I think that's going to be a tearjerker.
I think he would like to see that too.
Yeah, I think he loved it. Like, all the guys who were involved in this seemed to really love the project. Maybe at first they had their reservations about whether or not it was going to work, but they seem to have had a fantastic time on the shoot and they created something magical that's just going to be remembered forever, I think.
Yeah, and this film came out before I was born in 1984, but I feel like this Ghostbusters lore kind of formed quite a big part of my childhood. The cartoon was on. When I was thinking about it for the podcast, I realised that I must have seen the cartoon for a number of years before I actually saw the film, because that would have been on TV and I probably wouldn't have been shown the Ghostbusters film when I was tiny. So my little cousins had proton packs and people dressed up as Ghostbusters for Halloween. I'm pretty sure someone had an Ecto-1. So these things were part of my... Although the film came out, before I was born, the franchise was still a big part of my childhood.
Yeah. The franchise rats alone, making rich beyond your wildest dreams.
He was right.
Yeah, my friend Adrian had some Ghostbusters, and I remember people having ghost houses and stuff like that.
Yeah, the firehouse.
The firehouse, yeah.
I actually also had a pair of Ghostbusters trainers from Clark's.
Did you?
And they came in, like, the little shoebox they came in opened up like a trap.
Oh, yes.
They were amazing.
That's amazing.
Oh, they were so cool. I would totally wear them today if I still had them.
They would sell a bucket load as well.
I know.
Too. People just of a certain vintage.
Yeah.
Wanting to relive their childhood a wee bit.
Right, Clark's, re-release the Ghostbusters trainings.
One of the other strokes of genius, the casting of Bill Murray. So we talked about John Belushi unfortunately passing away, and that was who Dan Aykroyd had wished to play the part. But the fact that you get Bill Murray, it's not a step down by any means. And I think Bill Murray actually perhaps suits this character much better than John Belushi would have. John Belushi was a bit crazier, a bit more wild, and I just love Bill Murray's kind of
sarcasm,
sardonic ladies' man. So that's one of the things that sets this film up for greatness, I think, is you've got a fantastic comedy cast. Dan Aykroyd, Harold Ramis, Bill Murray, Rick Moranis, right there. You've got like the guts of Second City, Saturday Night Live. You've got these great comedians and they're all in one place.
And what's lovely is that each one of them has a completely different character, like Bill Murray's totally the mouth. Ray, Dan Aykroyd, he's the heart, and he's just, you wouldn't give him a wee snuggle. And Egon's the brains of the operation.
Yeah. Cold logic.
Absolutely.
So does that make Winston the body? Because in the comics, Winston's actually a Marine, I think it is. He's a soldier, he's seen combat and all these kind of things, so he's the body. He's the most physical of the Ghostbusters, which is not to say he's not intelligent. He's actually got the most common sense as well. The other ones are kind of distracted and by science and logic and all these kind of things, and he's kind of like, wait a minute, can we just like cut through the shit here and get to the point? So as scientists, they might not have the most amount of common sense, and he's kind of there to keep them right.
The script that Ernie Hudson first signed up for was more similar to that type of character. By the time they actually got to production, it was a much more scaled back part. I think because they lost Eddie Murphy from that role.
Yeah, if he'd have been in there, he was a huge star at the time anyway, so that would have made sense to give him a big part, you know, because he would have been like a major star in the film and would have been, you know, someone on the poster, for example. As it worked out, where Winston comes into the movie is not where Eddie Murphy would have come into the movie, I don't think. I think he'd have been in there right from the beginning, as opposed to, like, Winston turns up about 40 minutes into the film. His character doesn't really get developed very far, but we'll talk about that a little bit more when we come to all of the characters.
Well, that wasn't such a chore now, was it?
So we talked a little bit about the influences, and clearly Dan Aykroyd was influenced by some of the older ghost-busting movies. Ghost Hunters, wasn't it? Ghost Breakers.
Yeah.
So there was an old Abbott and Costello movie, and I think there's a Bob Hope movie as well, Bowery Boys. And so he was clearly influenced a little bit by them, and they had a problem getting the name as well. So Ghostbusters was actually like a 70s cartoon, and they had a problem getting it, but eventually I think it was the head of the studio moved on at one point, and they were able to sort of cut a deal to get it. So thankfully they got the name. Again, it's one of those most iconic names.
Yeah, I can't imagine it being called Ghost Breakers. Because, I mean, busting makes you feel good.
It certainly does. If you enjoy Ray Parker Jr. It's become such an iconic name, and as you said, I can't imagine cinema history without it.
And actually that's why the cartoon is called The Real Ghostbusters, just to sort of segregate it from the other Ghostbusters.
Oh, that's right, because they're both cartoons, obviously. Yeah, I understand.
But when they first started filming, none of that was set, so the name was still up in the air. So the scene where they first put the sign up on the firehouse, they actually filmed that with Ghostbusters and Ghost Breakers, which sounds terrible now that you listen back to it. And a lot of the film they shot with both versions, and eventually they decided that this was ridiculous and was going to take forever, so they gambled on getting Ghostbusters, and thankfully they did.
We got one!
So the film was largely shot in California, I think, in Los Angeles, but Dan Aykroyd has said that he thinks of New York as a character in the film as well. So one of the most iconic places is the Hook and Ladder 8. I've actually seen that in the Spider-Man game as well.
Oh, I've seen it in real life.
Have you? Oh, no
in
way.
New York, yeah.
Yeah, I actually got my picture taken outside it as Spider-Man.
In the game.
That's about as close as I got. They also used another firehouse as a kind of double, like for the interiors when they were in Los Angeles, and I think that was, I think it's Firehouse 23. That was kind of disused firehouse, and that was also where they filmed interiors for Big Trouble in Little China as well.
Of
we talked about that as well
yeah,
earlier,
we
but
did.
yeah, that's where Egg Shen's base was.
So if you've not listened to our Big Trouble in Little China episode, go and check that out after this one.
Yeah. And funnily enough, the PKE meter as well that Egon uses actually showed up in They Live.
Did it?
Another John Carpenter film. Yeah, it's one of the ones that the soldiers had.
Oh, no way.
So, yeah, it looked the exact same. There was no difference.
Wow.
They hadn't even tried and dress it. Obviously, they just didn't call it a PKE meter, but that was pretty much it.
Reduce, reuse, recycle. If you
that's exactly it.
can reuse your ghost hunting gear, you absolutely should. And also there's the iconic opening sequences in the New York Public Library.
That's such an amazing place. I wish I could go there as well.
I've been there too, Martin.
See you.
I know.
It's rubbish.
Let's
I
go.
want to go.
When it's safe to travel again, we'll go.
Yeah, I'd love to visit that place. I think a tour of New York, you'd probably just be like, oh my God, oh my God.
Is that thing from Ghostbusters? What's that thing from Ghostbusters?
There's been so many films shot there, so there would be so many places you'd just be like, oh my God, that was this film, that was that film. If you're sad enough to remember all those wee details.
Type something, will you? We're paying for this stuff.
So yeah, we talked a little bit about the production design. They actually hired John DeCure. He's a really legendary production designer, did Cleopatra. So they wanted to get that kind of scale. And again, that's one of those things that you can tell.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
like a really dramatic eye being cast over these sets and the size of them. And even though there was a lot of forced perspective, model shots and stuff like that, again, which we'll talk about, but it was just amazing that they could actually hire somebody of that calibre.
Yeah.
He was able to do it. But one of the other things I found out was that Bernie Wrightson actually did a whole bunch of the storyboards and things like that, and creature designs, drawings.
Who's that?
He's a comic book artist,
Oh,
famous for
okay.
Swamp Thing and various other things.
Okay.
Yeah, I just couldn't, mind blown. I was like, oh my God, Bernie Wrightson. Such an amazing artist. I think he passed away recently, so that was kind of sad. But yeah, it's just amazing to see. Sometimes this happens now, especially in Hollywood, where you've got a lot of comic book artists are hired as storyboard artists, because essentially a storyboard is like a comic book.
Yeah.
You know, it tells you where the characters are going to be, what's going to be the shot composition,
what the frame will look like.
what the frame's going to look like, where it's going to move, you know, using arrows and things like that to show where the camera's maybe going to come from and where it's going to go. So Yeah, it's really interesting. It's much more common now, but again, because this is way back in the 80s, I just assumed it was just like storyboard artists as opposed to comic book artists. But yeah, it was just crazy to find that out.
And the Ghostbusters logo, the wee ghosty with the ghost
the
sign.
no ghost sign.
That's definitely.
I mean, that's almost as big as Coca-Cola or Nike or Adidas, Apple. It's just everybody knows what that means.
And actually, the creators of Casper tried to sue.
Did they?
They said that the design of that ghost looked too much like one of the characters from Casper, but it was ruled against because apparently there's only so many ways you can draw a ghost.
Well, yeah, there is. I mean, I understand what they're getting at when you think about it.
I think it's Fatso, one of the uncles. Are they uncles?
Was it? Okay, so it's one of the family of
Casper, yeah. So, we're getting into real...
Because I was just thinking that Casper's got like this big bald head, but I can understand the kind of softness and the colour and all that kind of thing, and maybe the face looks a little bit similar. But it's kind of
classic cartoon ghost, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't think there's much more you can do with that.
Yeah, and the judge thought so too.
I make it a rule never to get involved with possessed people. Actually, it's more of a guideline than a rule.
So this is another one of those films that bucks the trend that. A lot of the ones that we did previously were sort of cult films that made a lot of money, maybe with the exception of Jurassic Park, but, like cult movies that seem to find their feet on home video. But this one made a huge amount of money. It was a big budget that they put into it. There's a lot of money being spent on the effects and the cast, clearly. But it made back so much money, like 20 times its budget or something like that.
And that just really wasn't expected for a comedy
I don't think
at this time.
Yeah.
And I think that was the highest earning comedy until Home Alone came along.
Yeah, it was for a long time. And I mean, it's such a crazy clash of genres again when you think about it. Like a comedy, ghost story, kind of science fiction elements in there as well. And the scientific language, when you think about it, the way Egon and Ray speaks, I find it fascinating.
Yeah.
But you can clearly see how people might be switched off a little bit by it. It feels a bit deep. And it's only really when you watch it a few times through, you start to really get the gist of it.
And what they're saying.
Yeah, because it flies over your head a little bit. Obviously, when I was a kid, I didn't understand what a Class 5 full rooming vapour was.
And also when I was a kid, I don't remember if the scene where Ray gets a special visit from a ghost during the night.
Yeah, that particular scene wasn't actually in the film, especially not the cuts that we would have got on VHS.
Yeah.
That was a later edition. I think it's in Fort Demering, and he gets visited by a ghost and obviously, undoes his trousers and does a thing. There was always a bit of it, a tiny little shot of a ghost above Ray. And you never seen anything further. You just seen him sort of folding his head back. But over time, there's been different versions released. And now I think the standard version is just, you see the ghost on top of him. She goes down. The trousers are unbuckle.
Oh my goodness.
And then he sort of folds his head back and you can understand.
And does like the googly eyes.
Yeah. And he falls out his bed because obviously he's dreaming at the time. But yeah, that was...
So do you think that was a dream sequence?
No, it was a dream. I think that was the thing. It was actually a dream. I don't think it's ever not been.
Okay.
It's just like Ray's just having these weird dreams about having sexual relations with ghosts.
Interesting. But that's part of one of cinema's great montages.
It is. That's a fantastic montage. Incidentally, the moment where you see them running down the street, that first time in the proton packs, that was actually like a costume test.
Was it?
Yeah, Ivan Reitman was saying, that was the first day on set, let's get them in their costumes, let's have them running down the street. And he just said the image was just so amazing. He knew it was going to be a hit simply because this was something unique that never been done before. These guys in the costumes wearing the packs and the sign, the no ghost sign.
Do you know, it's really funny because just hearing you talk about that image and the guys running down the street with the packs and the boiler suits, I actually feel really happy and joyful thinking about that scene and how exciting it is when you watch it and see things picking up and their business taking off and all the excitement that ensues.
I think what's really interesting about it is the colour of the suit and the cut of it is exactly what they were going for. They wanted these guys to seem like blue-collar workers, firemen or police officers. So they've got a uniform, but it's not a uniform that jumps out at you and goes, look at these guys. No, but it's not overly coloured or they could actually blend in almost to the background. It's only really just the kind of pack that you start to go, what's going on with these guys? When you see them running, they look like they're part of the sort of framework in New York almost. These kind of grey suits and they all just look like regular guys.
Just going to their job.
It's the kind of ectomobile that sort of starts to set them apart. Again, that's more like an ambulance or a fire truck or a police car or whatever. And they've got a mobile. Yeah, I really love that idea of just these working class guys, essentially. They're scientists, but they're not rich by any means, like they're struggling to get funding.
They've had to mortgage their houses.
Exactly. So, they're just regular guys with an idea, and I think that's just a great story as well.
We
came, we saw, we kicked its ass.
So this was one of the first films I've seen in VHS, and I think that's why it's stuck with me for so long. It's just magical. It's one of those films that I can never tire of watching. You know, every time I put it on, it just puts me in that place again, you know, all the way back to my childhood, and I'm just wide-eyed in amazement at it. And there's just so many things about it. The music, the creature design, you know, the setting, the characters.
Yep.
As you said earlier, you've got the lion, the tin man, and the scarecrow. Or the heart, the mouth, and the brain, if you want. But yeah, it's just amazing cast.
I don't know if you remember this as well, but the night before I had my PhD viva, so in the UK, to be awarded your PhD, you have an oral exam with someone who, like an
Have you got
expert.
degrees in psychology and parapsychology? You are a poor scientist.
Back off, I'm a scientist.
Also, yeah.
But yeah, so the night before my viva, I was super stressed out, really, really worried about it, and I was trying to cram more information in, just try to prepare, even though, you know, I'd been working towards it for 4 years, I guess, and you had been like, no, you need to relax, you need to chill out, let's watch a movie, and we watched Ghostbusters, and that's how I chilled out and relaxed before my oral exam. So if you don't know the story of the Ghostbusters, what's wrong with you?
Another one of those questions.
Yep, so a group of academics, parapsychologists, are ejected from their university. They're sacked because apparently their research is poor.
It's rubbish.
And they decide to set up their own company, being professional ghost removers.
Yeah, that's the core of the movie. You have that perfect makeup of people in the business. You know, you've got your front man, your salesman. You know, Bill Murray is your salesman. He's there to sort of sell the product, deal with the public, keep everybody sweet. And then you've got the heart of it, like you said, Ray, who's the person who's going to put the most work into it. You know, who's going to make sure it succeeds. And then you've got Egon at the back, and he's probably the guy who's making sure everything works numbers wise.
Absolutely.
Like, you know, like looking after the accounts maybe, but also looking after this more scientific parts of it. So yeah, the three scientists create the Ghostbusters, and the sort of ghost energy in New York starts to spike. And there's more and more calls. They get busier and busier and busier.
It sounds actually a little bit like a certain pandemic that's happening at the minute.
It's kind of crazy. Ultimately, it's because there is an evil force attempting to force its way back into this dimension via Evo Shandor's portal on top of the building that Dana Barrett lives in. Dana is visited by Zool, the minion of Gozer. And Lewis Tully, Rick Moranis, is visited by Vince Clortho, Keymaster of Gozer. And when the Keymaster and the Gatekeeper both meet, then chaos ensues. And there's even a 112.5 foot Marshmallow Man to destroy as well. And it actually was that height. I think because of the force perspective that they used, they had to have a specific height for it to work against the buildings and the set. So that was exactly his height.
You know, it's just occurred to me we really haven't had a completely successful test of this equipment.
I blame myself.
So do I. Well, no sense worrying about it now.
Why worry? Each of us is wearing an unlicensed nuclear accelerator on his back.
The character who stands out most is probably Peter Venkman, played by Bill Murray.
Peter Venkman.
Doctor.
I think they're all doctors anyway.
But he is fantastic in this. He's just absolutely made for it. Like we said, we talked about the fact that Belushi might have got this part, or would have got this part had he been alive at this point. But I actually believe the way it's written and the way it ended up on the screen, I don't see Belushi doing that. And I think Murray was actually the perfect choice.
Yeah.
He's got absolutely everything. I don't know what it is about the guy. He's so charismatic and attractive, even though he's just a regular looking guy. Like, he's not classically Hollywood gorgeous. You know what I mean? This is not Brad Pitt we're talking about. You still believe that he could attract somebody of like Dana's beauty. You know, like,
as you say, he's incredibly charismatic. Although there's some things in this particular film I didn't realise when I was younger watching it that his character was such a dick.
Yeah, he is. I mean, I don't think there's any doubt that he's very cheeky. Like, he's very sardonic. He's got really quick wit. He's not shy about putting people down. But that was just Bill Murray being Bill Murray.
Yeah.
They talked about the character voice. You know, that how a character would speak, what they would say in certain situations. And that's really important. That's where a lot of scripts can fall down, is that the character will start saying something in the second half that they maybe wouldn't have said in the first.
Yeah.
Because they've built up this idea of who they are, and then all of a sudden they say something that's like, what? Where did that come from?
And he does come across as, well, he is quite a sort of womanizer, kind of...
Yeah, 100%.
A real sleaze bag.
Yeah.
But what is nice is later on, and there's a couple of things that nowadays you think, maybe they wouldn't have put that in, but later on on when Dana becomes possessed and
Yeah.
she's kind of throwing herself at him, even though he's been trying to
Yeah, he's been desperately trying to get in there.
gain romantic progress with Dana. When she's possessed and starts kind of really throwing herself at him, he doesn't take advantage. He accepts that she's possessed and tries to take care of her. So
we talked about that. I think that's the first time that he shows his scientific side and actually lives up to the PhD.
yeah.
You know, where he actually shows that he's actually got compassion for his fellow humans.
Yep.
Because he's shown there that he understands that it's dangerous and that she's in danger and he needs to help her, and it's his job to do that. You know, at no point does it even cross his mind, I don't think. You know, he says jokingly, but he definitely just wants to see that she's okay and how to deal with this situation. And it's really funny because, for a scientist, he virtually does nothing scientific. Everything just seems like a total shyster, you know, like she said, you're like a game show host. He never seems to take anything seriously until that moment. And again, the person that you think he is would have taken advantage of that, but he's
Absolutely.
clearly not. There's a bit of a character development there.
Because at the start of the film as well, when you see him doing his experiment with the male and the female student,
Yeah.
and it's supposed to be the effect of like negative feedback on psychic ability.
Exactly.
So he's given this poor guy electric shocks and like really flirting with this attractive young female and telling her that she's got all the right answers and telling this guy that he's always got the wrong answer.
Yeah.
But funnily enough, towards the end of it, it actually works. His research is working.
Exactly.
The negative feedback he's given this guy he has actually starting to guess them correctly, but he's totally dismissing that because he's just interested in the girl.
Yeah, whether he's designed it that way or not, he's actually proved a point.
Yeah.
And whether or not he realises it is the issue. It's like, does he know that he just proved it? It's just, he's an interesting character. He starts off, as we said, really cheeky, and you know, you wouldn't trust him as far as you could throw him. But then he does some amazing things. He does some heroic things at the end as well. You know, if you think about the end sequence, he's the one that's walking forward, like pretty much leading the crew almost at the front.
Armed only with his sass.
Well, that's it. But you know, he's right up there. You know, there's the joking points where he'll maybe say, "Oh, you go first," and all that kind of thing. You know, but when they're walking up the steps towards Gozer and they kind of know that this might be it, they might all be going out, he's right there.
Yeah.
And again, if you're going to be the mouth is always the one who's going to have to be there first. He actually lives up to his kind of name and reputation there by, you know, taking that on board and just leading the guys into battle. And I think that's a really great moment.
So Michael Keaton actually turned down the opportunity to play Peter Venkman.
That's crazy. I didn't know that, but that's wild. Again, I don't think it would have worked.
I don't think
Michael
so
Keaton's
either.
a different kind of actor. He's got a different energy, a different vibe, especially at that point in his career. He'd just have been off Night Shift and maybe Mr. Mom at this point, I'm not sure. But I don't think that would have worked. I think Murray is just absolutely 100% perfect for this role. And doesn't matter who you pick out of the air, nobody fits the profile better. There's only one Peter Venkman.
And one other person who was put forward for it,
Yeah.
Chevy Chase.
I can understand that.
I can
again,
see him in that part.
I can understand it simply because they were all part of the same group, you know, Saturday Night Live, Second City. But again, Chevy Chase is amazing in National Lampoon's Vacation. Clark Griswold is just his magnum opus. I think that's his best work. But again, Bill Murray is just absolutely perfect for this role. There's no one who could have done it better.
Good evening. As a duly designated representative of the city, county, and state of New York, I order you to cease
Any and all supernatural activity and return forthwith to your place of origin or to the nearest convenient parallel dimension. That ought to do it. Thanks very much, Ray.
And next up we have the writer himself, Dan Aykroyd, playing Ray Stantz.
Yep, Dr. Raymond Stantz.
Sorry, Dr. Stantz.
Dr.
Professor
Stantz.
Dr. Stantz.
The thing that always amazes me about Dan Aykroyd is the way he speaks.
Oh, I love it.
It's his diction, his pronunciation, the way he enunciates, the phrasing. He speaks at 100 miles an hour.
It's amazing.
And you always hear every single word. Every single word is perfectly pronounced and articulated. It's just so sharp. It's such an amazing part of his character. Like, I mean, it's kind of like that in a lot of the films he's in. You know, that kind of almost became a trademark of
Particularly
delivering.
in Dragnet, I think
Yeah,
that really...
it suited that Dragnet character again. You know, this was probably just a part of Dan Aykroyd that came to the screen. But that's the greatest thing about this. He's able to deliver such amazing dialogue. Like, it's detailed dialogue. It's difficult words.
Yep.
It's difficult sentence structures. But he's able to do it with such precision and at such speed. And it just sounds effortless. I think it's just unbelievable.
It's beautiful to listen to. It's almost like a song. And I think the kind of speed and precision of it helps to really up the momentum in the film as well.
Yeah. Well, I think he's the most enthusiastic character.
Yep.
Like, as we said earlier, he's the heart, right? He's the one that's bubbling with enthusiasm. He's like a big kid. You know, when they meet when they see the firehouse and he sees the pole.
Does this pole still work?
Wow, this place is great. When can we move in?
It's so lovely.
You gotta try this pole. He's just absolutely brimming with enthusiasm. And the speech patterns, as you said, they actually bring that to the fore.
Yep.
Because he's just like this constant stream of information in his head and he needs to get it all out almost, you know what I mean? It's almost like he's speaking in tongues. Like he's possessed. The way he speaks, it's just so fast. But yeah, absolutely love him. He is a great actor, Dan Aykroyd. I think Ghostbusters is the high point. It's the thing he's always going to be remembered for. And I think it's the thing he's most attached to because it was his baby and because it was so successful, and it's also because it's so enduring. And it's probably the one thing he gets asked about more than anything. But again, I don't see anybody else in the role. He wrote it for himself. So that's why he's perfect. He couldn't have anybody else with that in mind.
Ray's also the first one to have his proton pack turned on when they're in the hotel for their first bust.
There's lots of iconic noises in Ghostbusters.
There are.
Just when you said that, it's the sound of the pack being switched on. It's just amazing.
I'm sure we used to we used to play at being Ghostbusters. Like, you would pretend to put on each other's packs and make the power up noise.
It's so good. There's an amazing sound profile in this film, and you know, the streams. It's just all great. But yeah, that sound is amazing, and it punctuates that scene because it sounds dangerous.
Yeah.
As soon as it happens, there's a kind of bass to it, and then that kind of high pitched whine, and it feels like this is going to explode.
Yeah, well, they are using an unlicensed,
nuclear
untested nuclear accelerator.
Yeah, I mean that whole idea of a nuclear accelerator mobile on your back is just ridiculous.
And the best place to switch that on for the first time would be in an elevator with two other humans.
Yep. Are you supposed to be some kind of a cosmonaut? I love that guy. But yeah, it's the faces as well.
Yeah.
You know, I'm still unsure in that sequence whether or not Harold Ramis is just trying to get out the way or if he's trying to turn his own pack on.
No, I think they're getting out. I think they're getting out of the way.
Getting out of the way?
Yeah. I mean,
when I was younger, I always thought he was like trying desperately to reach round to get his own, because you know, because Ray's just totally focused forward. He gets switched on and then he just kind of stares forward almost, and they two sort of move to the side. But I just think it's a really funny scene.
Yeah.
Ray has got an amazing arc in this story. It's like he's the one that puts up all the money. You know, he's the one that takes all the risks, essentially, you know, with the buying the firehouse and buying the equipment. And you can see that he easily gets taken for a ride, you know, where Venkman finds out how much Ecto-1 cost, you know, and he's like, oh my God, you paid that much. But Ray's just like, yeah, it's fine. We paid that much because that's what it's worth.
And it needs everything.
He just trusts. I think he probably bought it from the same guy that Clark W. Griswold bought his metallic P family truckster. Probably bought it from the exact same lot. But one of Ray's most important moments is, of course, when he conjures the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man.
Oh, clear your minds, empty your minds.
Oh, that's just the best. It's that you can tell he's like a kid that's just like farted or something. He's trying to just kind of like disappear in the background, like, you know, sheepishly, and they're like, wait a minute, what happened?
Who was it?
And it was, I couldn't help it. You know, it's just so good. And what he thinks about is the most ridiculous thing. When this was being written and when this was being created via special effects, they were just like, this is the silliest thing in the world. We are not going to work again after this comes out. But, you know, we're getting paid well for it, so let's go for it. Let's just see what happens. But yeah, Ray conjures the Marshmallow Man.
Stay Puft Marshmallow Man.
Again, it becomes absolutely iconic.
Well, that's the thing. Like, I didn't realise for a great number of years that the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man wasn't a brand icon outside of the Ghostbusters universe.
There's a lot of things it's based on, you know, Pillsbury Doughboy, Michelin Man maybe, and it looks a bit like, it's like kind of like King Kong or Godzilla, especially the way it's sort of filmed. But yeah, it wasn't actually like a proper brand. You actually see it in the film. There's points where you see the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man billboards, they're just kind of in the background. And
also the scene in Dana's apartment with the eggs.
Yeah, she's
got marshmallows.
Yep, Stay Puft Marshmallows on there, so yeah.
I really want a marshmallow now.
Roast them by the fire at Camp Conde.
apparently that's a real place.
That is a real place.
Do you have any hobbies?
I collect spores, molds, and fungus.
And rounding out the team is the late, great Harold Ramis. I'm so sad about Harold Ramis not being here. I'd really love to have seen him in the latest movie, even if it was just like a wee cameo or something like that, you know. But I was absolutely devastated when I found out he'd passed away, especially because he was still relatively young and he was still working. So yeah, when he passed away, it stung a fair bit. And he's an amazing presence in this film as well. You know, like, again, we've talked about their roles, and he is the cold logic. He is pure science. You know, like, nothing gets in the way. He practically doesn't smile in the
he doesn't
entire
smile
film.
at all, so apparently he made a conscious decision that the character wouldn't smile. So even at the points when, you know, Janine's all over him and she's so funny, you know, he doesn't crack, he doesn't break at all. I
mean, he gets angry at one point when Walter Peck outside after the kind of explosion.
Oh, that's right.
He shouts, "Your mother!" and tries to sit at him.
That's right. I forgot about that.
It's actually Egon that sort of cracks. The rest of them are kind of holding it all together, and he's the one that actually jumps. So that was kind of crazy.
It's not in this film, it's actually in the second one, but I loved it when he says we had a slinky. Or we'd half a slinky.
Yeah.
And then he straightened it.
Well, that's what a scientist would do. Like, how does this thing work? I need to find out its inner workings. Okay. Especially someone that cold, you know what I mean? That kind of supposedly unfeeling. I think he's definitely got feelings in there somewhere, just kind of buried. It's simply because of his work. Like, he takes his work very seriously, he takes science very seriously, and that just that becomes like the most important thing in any situation for him. You know, he's always analysing. And as I said earlier, he's probably the one that is responsible for the vast majority of the technology and keeping things on an even keel. You've kind of got extremes to a degree, you know, like where Peter Venkman doesn't really... You wouldn't think he would care too much about all the nitty-gritty and just be like, that's fine, just go with that, you know, whatever it is for an easy life. And Ray's so enthusiastic that he might miss something, you know, or like overcook something, but not really thinking about it, and he would be the one that you'd have to bounce the idea off. And funnily enough, this goes back to the writing process, where, you know, Dan Aykroyd writes this story that's just like totally, oh my god, it's going to be this and this and this, and it's going to have that and that and that, you know. And then Harold Ramis comes in and he kind of goes, wait a minute, why don't we do this and this, you know, let's kind of pare it back, let's make it tighter, you know, let's get it functioning a bit better, you know, let's make it stronger. And obviously Ivan Reitman would have done some of that as well, you know, like tightening it up.
Art imitates life.
That's it. I think any great character is one who is really the actor underneath, kind of just being themselves or bringing parts of themselves to the role, because then it's authentic. They're actually living it the way they would do it, and it gives it an authenticity and a life.
I've just realised the slinky line is like the equivalent of the "do you have any hobbies" line. So it's like when Janine says, "do you have any hobbies?"
I collect spores, molds, and fungus. Yeah. But this is the great thing about this as a comedy, is the fact that there's all these comedic lines and they're all delivered in completely different ways. Yeah. You know, Murray's delivering them off the cuff. Ray's kind of delivering them unwittingly almost. You know, like he's kind of like the butt of the joke. Whereas Egon's kind of delivering these things that are just so silly and ridiculous. Like, why would you say that? It fits each person's character. So they're all delivering these jokes in their own way. And none of them are like cheesy, you know, kind of boom, you see them coming. If you've never seen this film before, you won't really see the jokes coming. And I think it's only really over time, when you've watched it a few times as well, you start to maybe get other jokes that you didn't the first time. But there's so many jokes in this for adults to appreciate as well. As I grew older watching this film, it just seemed like every sort of maybe 3 or 4 years I would have a new understanding of a certain thing. And it grows richer because of that, you know what I mean? You get a better understanding of what they're trying to say and what the actual joke means fully. Sometimes you think you understand one, and then you hear it later with a bit more experience and it's like, oh my god.
You laugh along because other people in the room are laughing, but you don't really understand. That's the bedroom, but nothing ever happened in there.
What a crime.
Are you the keymaster?
One of the major changes to the original script was adding in a woman into the mix. During the writing process in Martha's Vineyard, they realised that they didn't have one in there. Awkward. So they wrote one in, and then we got Sigourney Weaver.
My hero.
She is amazing though, isn't
Heroine.
she?
Did we say hero?
Hero, heroine, I don't know.
Let us know, listeners.
Answers on a postcard. Or slide into our DMs, as they say these days. But yeah, we got Sigourney Weaver, and she was just off Alien. It was a few years before that, but that was what she was most famous for. And she played a fantastic female hero in that film, Ellen Ripley. And here she's just as amazing, even though she's not maybe a central character as far as like she's not part of the actual team, but she plays quite a pivotal role. And I think what's also important here is that there's personal stakes towards the end. That was one of the problems that they had to try and address, was this ending seemed quite silly. And if there's no personal stakes involved, then it all feels kind of empty, and it feels like a bit of a spectacle, you know, rather than having any substance. So having Dana, you know, be taken over by Zool, Terror Dog, and she becomes Zool and is part of the sort of the ceremony on the roof. Yeah, it added sort of personal stakes to Peter Venkman, you know, because they'd worked with her that whole time. You know, she came to visit them. She was, I think, their first customer, wasn't she? Pretty much.
That's right.
Like their first walk-in customer, at least, anyway. So she had a really personal connection, which is really important.
Sigourney Weaver was really interested in this role because it was a departure. She was worried about becoming typecast in the kind of Ripley heroine role. And apparently she rocked up to this audition and like pretended she was a dog and stuff like that. So she really got on board with it.
Well, that was the thing. I think she was seen as a serious actress, and they were also a little bit worried. And she immediately, as you said, went down on all fours and started barking like a dog, because that's what was required for the script. So immediately they knew, oh wow, she can do this no problem. And I think she had a bit of a comedy background, performer's background in that respect, you know, like amateur dramatics and theatre and stuff. And she just, that was something that was in her locker but was never asked for before. She's amazing in this. Like, she looks so good. That face... that's like the face of the 80s.
Definitely.
You know, that jaw, she's so statuesque,
those
as I said.
Cheekbones.
Those cheekbones. And her height as well, you know, so...
Yeah, she's like 6'2".
Yeah,
something.
it's kind of scary, ridiculous. Like, she's really, really tall. And she towers over Bill Murray at points, you know, especially when she's wearing heels and stuff. You know.
And that kind of adds to that comedy.
It does, like I said.
Reaching above his level kind of thing.
Yeah, he's absolutely punching. Punching above his weight. He's smaller than her. He's not as good looking as she is. He's not as intelligent as she is. He's not as talented as she is.
Yeah, she's
all these aspects, you know, but he still is able to sort of worm his way in there with his sort of charm.
He wins her over, which he does say that he's going to do.
He does. And I think it's maybe that aspect of his character, you know, that kind of perseverance.
Tenacity.
He won't take no for an answer, which is definitely not the way forward. But she is, yeah, she's amazing in this, and she's got a brilliant character arc in it, you know, starting off as someone who absolutely disbelieves in it. It's just, can't be real possibly, so someone has to explain this to me kind of thing. So she gets drawn into their world. And I think that's all four of those main characters are all in the same boat, where they start off in this realistic platform, and then it just gradually spirals further and further into this kind of fantastical world, filled with all these ghosts and figures and beings and stuff. So she sort of fits that mould perfectly, because that's what happens to her exactly. You know, she starts off grounded, and then all of a sudden she's a dog. And an interdimensional gateway, you know, on top of a building.
Absolutely.
You have been a participant in the biggest interdimensional cross-rip since the Tunguska blast of 1909.
Felt great.
We'd like to get a sample of your brain tissue.
Okay.
And her poor neighbour,
Louis Tully.
Oh, he's the best. I love him so much.
Yeah.
Rick Moranis in
Poor old
this
Rick
role.
Moranis. He got punched recently.
I
was
was
so
horrified to hear
Yeah.
about that. I hope he's okay.
Terrible. Some guy just walked up and punched him in the face.
Attacked him in the street.
But anyway, he steals the show a wee bit in this
Yeah,
film.
he's great.
He really does, Louis Tully. Apparently this was supposed to be John Candy, which I can absolutely see. I think Louis Tully, played by Rick Moranis, is perfect again. It's perfect casting. It works brilliantly for who they wrote after the revisions. John Candy would have worked, I think, as a different Louis Tully.
Yeah.
But I think he wanted to do it as a German. He wanted to have a German accent and have German shepherds and all these kind of things. So there was some points that he wasn't willing to budge on. It's almost like he didn't want to do it. So I think by being kind of like belligerent and pig-headed, they'd maybe go, all right, listen, let's just not bother. But I think he probably regretted it.
Yeah.
You know, as the sort of money rolled in for Ghostbusters, and obviously over time it's grown arms and legs, and he might have regretted not taking the character on. But yeah, I think Rick Moranis is the perfect choice.
I think so, and I think what he did with the character is perfect.
Yeah.
Physically as well. Like,
Yeah.
he looks tiny in this film. He looks like
does.
such a small guy. And he is small. He's like 5'4". But when you've got all the Ghostbusters and Sigourney Weaver, we're all like over 6 foot. So
Yeah.
that added that physical dimension. Apparently he supplied his own wardrobe as well.
Oh,
which I absolutely
so good.
love.
Some of the things that he wears are crazy as well. You
That
know,
wee
like
tracksuit.
everything. The tracksuit is just like the short legs and stuff. And
so
just-
cute.
It just makes him look hilarious. But that's a guy who just knows comedy. You know, it's not in your face. You don't really see the legs of his trousers until one point where he walks away, and you see, oh my god, his legs. His cat's dead.
And apparently a lot of his lines were ad-libbed. And the scene in the party where he like introduces people by their accounting.
Yeah, that whole scene is just like ad-libbed. He just kind of came up with it.
And it's one take.
Yeah, and again, similar to Aykroyd in that respect, where the delivery's fantastic. It's got all these different intonations and it ebbs and flows, and you know, he's introducing all these different people and all their backgrounds, and it's just an amazing moment. It really is. And the costume he's wearing at that point as well is hilarious. Like,
the turtleneck and the shirt.
Me and my friend Adrian have got this thing about these crazy setups where people they wear these kind of ridiculous combinations of clothes that look like they came for the 70s and the 80s combined, and this is a classic. That sky blue shirt, and he's got like a mustard polar neck and the trout, and just it's so bad.
Did you say polar neck?
Polo neck. You always think I say polar neck. Anyway, yeah, the setup is just terrible, but hilarious at the exact same time, you know.
And again, that was another one that we wouldn't have got as kids when he's introducing like, oh, and they're bankrupt and she's
and they've got a carpet cleaning company in receivership. And like she's paying herself from a loan they took out and all this stuff. It's just like he's giving people's financial history as if it's nothing. You know,
okay, who brought the dog?
They're the kind of things you'd be so embarrassed about, and he's just throwing it out there.
It's also really funny that, so he gets possessed by the Keymaster, but during this film he gets locked out of his apartment like 3 times.
He does, yeah. But again, that's that thing. He's just like this silly slapstick character almost. He's like a throwback. He's very much like someone out of an Abbott and Costello movie.
Yeah. Or
a Bob Hope movie, or even like the Three Stooges or the Marx Brothers. You know, he's that kind of silly. And I think it's because he looks a certain way as well, and he plays that. You know, there's very subtle physical comedy. Like if you look at the way he walks, like his feet flaring out and all that kind of stuff, it's just this a really comedic walk. And that's the kind of thing that some comedians might not even consider. Like he has to have this particular gait, and his feet are going to do this, and his arms are going to do this,
and his wee slightly flared trousers will
flick
and
it makes it look even worse. You know what I mean? That amplifies it, you know, and just makes it look even more hilarious, as far as I'm concerned anyway. But he's another character that's got some fantastic lines in this, and when he starts talking about being the Lord of the Sibylla and Vulgus Fuldrana, all that stuff is just, I mean, I've watched it so many times and I've got the subtitles up, and I just love seeing the names. The names and the places and things like that he talks about, and all these aspects. The rectification of the lack of McKittrick supplicants, and just,
I love it when
he's so good.
When he's talking to the horse and he's talking about the slaves will be freed, wait for the signal. Like, so, and just the expression on his face, it's brilliant. And the way he almost bounces straight back, you know, he's been turned into a dog, encased in a statue, freed after all this, and when the guys introduce themselves as the Ghostbusters, he kind of looks up through the marshmallow fluff and it's like, who does your taxis?
Ghostbusters, what do you want?
So the cast is kind of rounded out by Annie Potts playing Janine, and she's just like the perfect New Yorker. I think Sarah Bernhardt was supposed to get that part. Do you know who Sarah Bernhardt is?
No, I don't know.
Do you remember King of Comedy? There's that absolutely neurotic, crazy woman, really skinny, that's chasing Jerry Lewis's character, constantly trying. Remember her? Like total New Yorker.
Oh, she would have worked in that
She
part.
would have been absolutely perfect. She really would. I love Annie Potts in this as well, though.
I think she's great.
She's great. She's so sassy and cheeky and quick. But you can see she's got that kind of intelligence as well.
Yeah, it's a drier humour than I think
exactly.
that other actress would have brought to it, and I do like it.
Yeah, and she'd have been a perfect match for Egon, actually. You know, they were actually like a perfect match.
Well, in the cartoon, were they not kind of a thing in the cartoon?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I think that comes from the film, you know, because like their kind of romance sparks a little bit, and it's just like complete opposites almost, but then when you look a bit deeper, they're actually very, very well suited.
She's very well read.
Because he's this guy that seems quite detached, so that would have been quite a good balance, I think, for him, somebody to keep him right, but someone who actually really cares for him as well and loves him for the right reasons, because she's accepting him for what he is as well. So yeah, I think that's a really interesting relationship, which I'm kind of sad didn't get developed too much more, but again, there's only so much you can do in an under 2 hour film when there's all that other stuff going on, you know, like the special effects and everything. And
her voice is really iconic in this film as well. And you know, there's a couple of lines you really think of when you think of Janine, like when she's angry and she picks up the phone and it's Ghostbusters, what do you want?
I mean, I don't know what a proper New York accent sounds like, because obviously
definitely know what I just did.
But To me, that sounds like a perfect New York accent, like a response, but I'm only going by films as opposed to like actually living in New York. To me, that's like the Dustin Hoffman, I'm walking here, that kind of thing, and then her, you know, like, Ghostbusters, what do you want? You know, I love
We
that.
got one! I just thought about, it's not this one, it's Ghostbusters 2, when she's talking about their babysitting Oscar, and she's like, we gave him some French bread pizza, he went right to sleep. It's like horrifying, feeding a baby a Findus French bread pizza.
You know what this means, don't you? We're going to have to do Ghostbusters 2 now.
I'm totally fine with that.
Because we've talked about it a couple of times. But yeah, Janine Melnitz, Annie Potts, absolutely fantastic. I love her in Pretty in Pink as well. She's great in that. She's kind of like a mentor to Molly Ringwald. But yeah, she's fabulous in it.
Now, we're actually going to go before a federal judge and say that some moldy Babylonian god is going to drop in on Central Park West and start tearing up the city.
Sumerian, not Babylonian.
Yeah, big difference. No offense, but I got to get my own lawyer.
And the last Ghostbuster is Winston. We talked a little bit about him, but again, it's simply because he comes into the movie almost halfway through,
very
about
late
40 odd minutes, somewhere about there. So it all comes back to the fact that it was written for Eddie Murphy originally. Murphy didn't do it, so the part was reduced. And then you've got a relative unknown in Ernie Hudson coming in to do it, but I think he's brilliant.
He's really good.
Because he's got that, he's the one who is the man on the street. He's kind of like us in that situation, going into their world, and he's asking all the questions that a regular person would, you know, and he's got the reactions that a regular person would have. And I love his sequence in the mayor's office where he's telling them, I've seen shit that'll turn you white. I love all that stuff. Like, he's got some really brilliant dialogue in it. You know, in the jail cell, when they're kind of discussing how the doorway is going to open and all that kind of thing, and they're discussing Shandor's structure, and and he's just like exactly like the guys around them. He's like, I want to get my own lawyer because this is insanity.
Insane.
This is absolutely insanity. But he's not scared.
Yeah.
He'll sort of run headlong into danger and all that kind of stuff, and he's definitely one of the guys. I think they actually cut a scene out of it where he said, why don't we just leave and go to go visit somewhere and just wait until this blows over? And I'm glad they took that out because, you know, I think he's a strong character. He's there with them, you know, fighting the good fight, and you can see that he becomes a really important part of the team.
Yeah.
And it's great that he's got a full part in Ghostbusters 2. And as I say, the comic book character is far more rounded. You know, like I said, he's a Marine and he's got a lot more prominent spot in the team. He's far more important to them, and it's not just about the central three. And it's great that that's evolved over time.
Is this true? Yes, it's true. This man has no dick.
There's a few more characters that make an impact on the story, probably the foremost of which is William Atherton. And he's Walter Peck from the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, and he gets it in his head that the Ghostbusters they've got a light show going on and they've got toxic chemicals and all that stuff, and he wants to shut them down. So, and I think this was just his audition for Die Hard. Dick Thornburg. But yeah, he's great in it as well. He's a perfect foil to Bill Murray's character, because this is like we talked about the mouth. You know, like Ray wouldn't have that conversation. Neither would Egon. Egon would be like, I'm busy. Ray would be like, you know, bursting with enthusiasm and probably say the wrong thing. Venkman knows how to deal with this kind of guy. It's almost like his opposite.
Yeah.
His opposite number. You know, he's just like a mouth. That's a great wee moment where they two have their argument that just it gradually spirals. I love that because he goes in with a terrible attitude straight away.
Yeah.
And I love how Venkman can read it. Venkman reads that intent straight away, and he's really sarky, like more so than he is with other people. Even though he can see this guy's important, he's like, nah, this guy's not getting any of my respect. And by the time that conversation's done, you know, they're like enemies. But yeah, he's brilliant. In the scene in the mayor's office, you know, where he gets called Dickless, I'm gonna get him a nice fruit basket, I'm gonna miss him. He's the butt of so many jokes. And I think the actor William Atherton gets that in the street.
Yeah,
unfortunately,
he gets so much hate. Maybe not now, but back then.
It's not really hate, it's just like kind of joking, like people calling him a dick and pencil neck and all this stuff, and he must get so bored of it. And again, simply because he was also in Die Hard pretty much playing the exact same character.
But it shows that he played a really good part, that people,
he did,
you know.
like, that's the thing that any actor wishes, that when they finish playing their part and people see it on the screen, that they remember it, and you know, it makes a big impression, whether it's you know, as an evil person or a good person or whatever, you know. So, but he's definitely a memorable part.
Gozer the Gozerian. Good evening.
And the other sort of memorable cast member is Slavitsa Jovan. She was Gozer.
That's right.
So she only really appears towards the end, but obviously it's a very important character. This is the person we've been waiting on appearing. And I think originally that was supposed to be Pee Wee Herman.
It was, which is
Paul
insane.
Rubens, that's just bananas. But I think the stupidity level of the Marshmallow Man was enough. And she kept it serious.
Yeah.
Even though she looks kind of ridiculous, this cross between Grace Jones and David Bowie. She's got that mix.
Kind of androgynous look about her.
Androgynous look, yeah.
I think actually when I was a child, I didn't realise it was a woman.
Yeah.
I think I thought it was a man.
I mean, she looks amazing.
And she does.
She's absolutely fantastic. That hair, again, that bone structure. They really pick some really good looking actors for this film. But she looks amazing. She does look like a god, standing up there with the. No, she does though, with the costume and the high heels, and just like so kind of aloof and cold to everything. There's some great moments where she kind of goes down in her hunkers and she's kind of analysing them almost like an animal. And I still love that backflip. I think it used to be for like Dolby or one of these sort of. Remember
like
there was an advert and you just
right.
The advert was her doing the backflip and landing
over your head.
Yeah, and it was like 5.1 surround or something like that, or Dolby Stereo or something.
Yep.
And she was the
She was
backflip
the
and the
sound.
landing was the sound. But yeah, I love that scene. I think it's so good. So she was the physicality. She provided the look in the body, and it was Paddy Edwards. Was the person who voiced her.
Oh, okay.
And it sounds amazing as well, doesn't it?
It does.
I love it.
Choose the form of your destructor.
I think another massive coup for the film was getting Laszlo Kovacs to be the cinematographer as well, and he did Easy Rider, 5 Easy Pieces. So yeah, he'd done quite a few legendary films, and again, it's one of these people where you kind of hope you can get someone of that calibre, but they say yes, they turn up, and all of a sudden they're doing it. And there's a few cool techniques in this. We talked last night about the use of Steadicam. This is before we even watched the sort of behind the scenes documentary, and what I noticed was that there's a lot of sequences where they'll be walking down the street and the camera will sort of follow them out and then go into the traffic almost.
Yeah.
Like the camera's in the traffic, it's moving backwards with them. And that was one thing that Ivan Reitman talked about, that he wanted to catch all three actors at the same time rather than using a lot of close-ups. Instead, they kept everybody in frame. And it's really funny watching it again to see that if someone's delivering a line, like we talked about in the Sedgwick, where Dan Aykroyd's delivering his line and telling him about what the ghost is, this is a class 5 fluoromine vapour, blah blah blah, and at that same point Bill Murray is actually just in the background getting the notepad out, and he's looking at Egon as if to say, right, what we're going to say here, because then it goes immediately to him saying, okay, for the entrapment
4,000,
and you see Egon's got that, he's got his fingers up against his face and he's got 4 fingers out and he asks him about the special this week on proton charging storage of the beast, and he just brings up one finger. I think that's brilliant interaction, but that's all set up by the shot before, where you see Bill Murray bringing out the notepad.
Yeah.
And I think when you seen that in the original presentation on video, that was all cut out. That was out
Just
of
because
shot.
of the format.
Just because of the framing,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So when you see it in widescreen, you see the beauty of a great cinematographer.
Yeah, the whole
and
construction of the scene.
yeah, and a great director knowing exactly what to catch, and the cinematographer being able to capture that and know when to cut and who to focus on properly and all that kind of stuff. So the Steadicam wasn't something that was in circulation too much at this point in Hollywood, and they might have been one of the first crews to actually use it, especially to that degree. But if you have a wee look at that, when they come out the bank, they come out the door, the camera's going backwards with them, and it just walks into traffic, and you've got the people walking beside it, behind it. There's guys behind the principal actors, and they're walking at the same speed, just a little bit faster, a little bit slower. There's people passing by them, and it really feels like they're in with the people.
Yeah.
And that cements their place in the story and in the film. They're not apart from anyone. They're just regular folks.
They're literally the man on the street.
Yeah, they're the man on the street. They're on the ground level. They're with everyone. And that's why they become such heroes by the end of the film. Like they're heroes of the people. Everybody's cheering for them. It doesn't matter where the background is.
I mean, I don't know why they're cheering and they're not running for the hills. But they are.
Again, that's any hero breeds confidence. When you see the hero turning up, you're not scared of the bad guy anymore.
That's
you're just
true.
like, this is fine. They're here to save us and it's good. I mean, if Superman turned up, you wouldn't be giving a shit. You'd be like, well, that's fine. He's here.
Right, there's Rambo.
Right, there's Rambo.
That's true, and I guess that's part of New York being a character in the story.
Yeah.
I think.
And its people, New York, its places and its people is a very important part of the story.
in both this and Ghostbusters 2.
Exactly, it certainly is. But those early establishing, well, they're not establishing shots in the technical term, but those are early shots which establish character, and they're really important. And these are the kind of like nitty gritty, the parts of cinematography that sometimes get overlooked, especially in a film that's full of special effects. You know, there's a lot of other stuff going on, and people kind of get drawn to maybe the jokes or the set pieces, but these are the things that are actually telling you a story without actually having to give it to you through the, you know, the dialogue.
There is no Dana, only soul.
So that brings us neatly on to the effects, and there are some just amazing effects in this. You know how much, if you've heard a couple of these podcasts, you'll know how much we love practical effects in this house. We absolutely love them. Even though they look old in comparison to modern effects, I still love them. They've still got the same character.
I think a lot of them really hold up. So
They
there's
do,
some points,
they do.
so things like the proton pack blasts, what would you call it? The like laser. It's not lasers. It's
not lasers,
Plasma flow.
Yeah, the stream.
The stream.
Yes.
Oh, of course it's the stream, Shonagh.
Don't cross the streams.
Don't cross the streams.
Yeah, so.
It'd be very bad. But that looks great. I think the ghost animation looks
Onion Head.
fantastic.
So Slimer was called Onion Head originally.
I know.
And did you know that was actually supposed to be John Belushi?
I learned that recently.
That's amazing, isn't it? So he's actually in the film, you know, as a character almost. Like I said earlier, I think that's what they'll maybe do with Harold Ramis.
Yeah.
They might have a ghost that kind of has his demeanour maybe,
I
or
think they
speaks like
will.
him or something like
Yeah.
that, and it might be like, oh my god, is that him? Anyway, so that was meant to be John Belushi, and again, that's another reason why I don't believe he would have been suitable for the Peter Venkman that we got.
Yep.
If he was just superimposed into that character, I don't think it would have worked. But yeah, the effects, I absolutely love the effects in this. Again, Steve Johnson, we talked about in the last one, Fright Night and so on, he worked on this, he created the cabbie. And I think that was kind of his audition for Fright Night, because they said, oh, you did the cabbie in Ghostbusters. So, and also, like we talked about last time as well, the ghost that was used in the library scene, the extra maquettes and models they had left over, they gave them to the crew in Fright Night, and they used them to
Right,
burn
I
them.
recognise that jawline.
So yeah, the effects works brilliant in this. You know, they're using the old Pepper's ghost. A lot of the stuff is in camera. You know, it's actually there on the set. The actors can see it. The actors can interact with it for the most part. And again, you get a really good response because of that. You know, there was a time period in modern film where it was going far too close to all CGI.
Yeah.
And you were losing it. You could actually see in certain films, especially like the Star Wars prequels, where eye lines weren't good, you know, where actors were feeling and looking really wooden because they were interacting with nothing. They were interacting with a whole bunch of blue stage. It takes a great director to get something out of actors in that respect, giving them the right motivation and giving them the right visual imagery in order to sort of go with it. Zack Snyder's great at that. You know, like 300 is all filmed in blue screen, but he's able to sort of get his actors up for the task, and there's enough set and there's enough people and things in the area for them to sort of bounce off. It's a difficult skill to try and get a performance out of actors when there's nothing there to bounce off. And especially at that time, if you'd just given Bill Murray, for example, nothing to work with, he might have done something, but you wouldn't have got what you got.
Yeah.
I think it was really important that they had practical effects to work with.
I mean, the library scene at the start with the librarian, I was absolutely terrified of that.
Yeah, it's a fantastic opening, like the whole sequence in the library to begin with, you know, the lady goes down and she's looking around, and then the cards.
Yeah.
Those cards on wires. It's just simply on wires that you can't see, like fish gut. They're just being pulled across. It's an amazing effect.
Fantastic.
And then you get a simple light being turned on in a wind machine, and then the music begins, and it's just, that's the opening.
The only effects that don't really stand the test of time, I think, are the points where the dogs are moving.
Yeah, it's stop motion though. So
of course.
Stop motion's never going to look
Yeah,
great.
it looks juddery and...
But again, if you can suspend your disbelief, for me, I always think to myself, well, what does a terror dog from another dimension look like? And
how does it move?
How does it
How
move?
does it move?
Like, you know it's a special effect,
Yeah.
but if you suspend your disbelief, you can say, oh, fair enough.
Yeah. And
that might be what it looks like.
It never took away anything when I was younger, and it's
Not
only
at all.
now when they're still or when they're actually puppets,
Yeah.
they look so good that
Yeah.
there is a contrast when they're moving.
Yeah, when they're puppets, you can clearly see they move at the right speed, you know, and it feels more lifelike maybe,
Yeah.
even though you can see it's kind of like rubber and there's puppeteers inside and stuff, but it doesn't really bother me in the slightest.
And how good is the scene where Dana gets pulled into the chair?
Yeah, that's one of the great sequences of the movie.
It is.
That's kind of on the same level as something like Poltergeist.
Yeah.
You know, where it's not incredibly scary. Like, it's not like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, bloody, gory, kind of absolutely terrifying in that respect. But it's because you feel like that could happen.
Yeah, I genuinely did feel that could happen.
You sit down in your chair, you know, these hands just come up and hold you down, and there's a face pushing its way through your door.
Oh, that was so scary
as well. The door opens, the smoke, you know, the dry ice, and you just see that face and the roar, and you get pulled towards it. So, yeah, that's brilliant. And the way Sigourney Weaver plays that scene as well, really, again, because it's practical, there's people actually there grabbing onto her, holding onto her. She's not getting up, and you can see she's really struggling to try and fight against that. You know, she's just acting, obviously, but that works because you've got that kind of tension in the scene, because the actor feels like they're actually battling against something, and she's just fantastic at that. She's like a modern day scream queen.
Yeah.
You know, Sigourney Weaver's scream is one of the ones that sort of resonates through cinema, you know, with the Alien as well.
Back off, man. I'm a scientist.
So the ectoplasm is actually made of methylcellulose.
Oh, here we go.
So that's
science lesson.
So you've probably eaten some methylcellulose at some point. It's used as a thickener in food.
Right.
So you'd probably be able to make your own at home if you so desired.
Another scene that's hilarious when you look back at the behind the scenes is the moment where they first test the packs, and that poor lady comes out with a cart full of toilet rolls and towels and stuff, and she's just like doing her rounds, and they actually loaded it with more explosives than they should have had. And when it blows up, it really blows up.
My
and
goodness.
That's actually her reaction. She's like, what the hell are you doing?
Oh, that's such a
That's
shame.
actually a real reaction. She's just looking around going, what's going on? Was that real? So that's fantastic. I don't think they meant it to be like that, but it just was a bit too loaded
it works
compared
really
to what
well.
it should have done. And that same guy, he was like a kind of explosives fire expert, and he also sort of orchestrated the explosion at the top of the building in order to try and get the flames and explosion to shoot out in all four directions, because that's a brilliant explosion.
Yep.
You know, there's these great cinematic explosions like the Death Star, for example, blowing up. You know, there's things like that really stand out. And that one where it blows the top floors off the building is just amazing, you know, because it goes out in all four directions. And so he used plates, deflector plates, to make it go certain directions, but it was a pretty hefty explosion. And somebody got injured on set because a bit of wood or something flew over, hit a wall, bounced back and hit him in the head.
Oh my goodness.
But yeah, he was apparently notorious for that, like always just going that wee bit extra.
11.
Because the thing is, you get a reaction from your actors as well.
Yeah.
You know, if something goes a bit bigger than expected, you know, like the directors may be saying, it'll be fine, just going to be a wee pop, and you know, you'll all react to it, and there'll be a bright light and blah, blah, blah. And this guy just puts like an extra stick of dynamite or something in there, and he's like, watch this.
I love the gadgetry in the film as well.
Yeah, the positron glider.
Absolutely.
Neutrino wand.
And like the PKE meter.
Yeah,
I love
amazing.
the way that it's got like the little arms, the little antenna that come up when there's
danger
or activity, because it's that good cue to the audience, like that visual cue that there's something happening without them having to see it.
Yeah, again, that's just visual storytelling 101. Having something that identifies danger. Look at Alien, for example, right? So Alien, you've got the tracker. Tracker's a perfect device. It's just a dot.
It was just a dot.
It's like a really primitive Pac-Man just moving.
We thought that looked so futuristic.
But there you go. As soon as you hear the beeps and the dot moving, you know, oh my God, it's the alien. You don't have to, you have to see it. Look at Jaws with the yellow tanks. They attach it to it with the arrow. You know, there's the 3 tanks. So every time you see them, it's like, oh my God, the shark.
There it is.
But
you
don't know
even
where
need
it
to
is.
see the shark.
You don't need to see it. You know it's there. In some ways, you know what it's doing. Like if it's circling or if it's just staying still. So yeah, that's visual storytelling 101, and it's clever. You know, audiences love that. Again, there's the kind of things that soak in psychologically, and you maybe not bring it forward in your mind, but they're the kind of things that really work cinematically.
Another classic gadget in this, Venkman goes to Dana's apartment for the first time, and he's got that like box with a little squeezy thing and the little sucker.
It looks like he's carrying a tape deck and, you know, one of those things that you take people's pressure for their heart.
People's blood pressure. But it turns out this is actually a real piece of kit for detecting gas leaks.
Is it?
It's like this old-fashioned gas snuffer device.
Gas snuffer.
So I can't remember what it's called, but yeah, that was actually a real thing.
It's
Not
so
for
good.
Detecting ghosts.
Yeah, but I love how he works with it.
Yeah.
You know, clearly he hasn't got an absolute clue how it works.
No, not
He's
at
just
all.
walking about like puffing this thing. And it's when he goes in and she's like, are you sure that thing's working correctly? And he's like, he almost gives the game away. You can see he almost says like, that's not plugged in or something. Like he's not got a clue
Or it
how it's
doesn't do
working.
anything.
Or it doesn't do anything. And he kind of cuts himself off. I think that's really cool, subtle acting.
Oh, and there's the little colander that Rick Moranis has to wear later on with the little chin. It's the little chin strap. Oh, it's just
That's
so
brilliant.
cute.
There's that moment where he picks up the coffee pot that's boiling and he takes a mouthful and he's like holding it in his cheeks like. Another piece of technical equipment that is quite prominent in the film is the containment unit as well.
Oh, of course.
Just basically a big red box on the wall.
Big skip.
But again, I love that idea. You know, it's got that wee trap reservoir where they stick it in, they do something to it, then they bring out the empty one.
The light is green,
The
trap is clean.
Ghosts incarcerated in our custom-made storage facility. To think there's all these ghosts all just like roaming around in there, or like a kind of prison cell. Can imagine one of those kind of overnight tanks that you get in like a New York prison. You know, all these drunks and all these kind of things all just kind of like, ah! So it's all these ghosts doing the same thing. But yeah, I love that idea. And obviously the Ectomobile, Ecto 1 is just, we've said this word a million times, but it doesn't get any more iconic as a movie vehicle goes. Like any top 10 of movie vehicles. Yeah. You know, you're going to have the DeLorean, the Batmobile, and all these kind of things.
And if you hear the siren, like, you know that's Ecto 1.
And it's got a weird tone that it's reminiscent of a fire truck or an ambulance or a police car, but it's a different tone.
Yeah, it's like a really whiny tone, isn't it?
Kind of weird. Another part of the film, we talked a little bit about that earlier, about the sound profile, about having these sounds that you just instantly go, that's a PKE meter, or that's the proton pack being switched on, or that's the stream being released from the neutrino wand, or, you know, that's Ecto 1 flying around the corner. There's all those things that you just like instantly can pinpoint straight away, and that's really clever sound design as well. So again, Star Wars, for example, is full of that. You know, lightsabers, blasters, TIE fighters, all these kind of things. Darth Vader's voice, or Darth Vader's sort of breathing. These are the things that can sometimes be overlooked in modern movies. You could be looking at a character, for example, in Star Wars, and they could be standing next to a door, and then you hear that breath or the lightsaber starting up, and it changes the scene entirely, even though you can't see this person. It's just like we said about the visual storytelling, where you know that thing or person is around. It's the same idea. You know, you could just hear that sound and it's like, oh my god, oh yes, here we go, they've started up the pack, or the PKE meter's going off its head. You hear that pop up.
And the music in this film is wonderful as well.
It is. Every great film as well, like, especially like a blockbuster, it could always do with a fantastic song that's so memorable. Look at the Bond franchise.
Yeah.
What's the first thing people think about the Bond franchise? It's the song.
Yep.
It's even become like a thing. You know, like,
everyone wants to do a Bond song.
Yeah, but it gets released before the film. It's like a big deal. Oh, this is the new Bond song.
Yep.
Here we go. Everybody's into it. And again, it's become like a standard thing for that particular franchise. It's something that it's identified with. It's really important that it has either a musical cue that's instantly memorable and recognisable. Jaws. 2 notes, semitone apart. Or
that sounded less threatening.
that was the trumpet version. You know, something like that. So like a musical cue that's like easily recognisable, or a song like Ghostbusters. You know.
But I kind of feel like this film had both.
It did. You've got Ray Parker Jr.'s Ghostbusters, who you're going to call, all those things. That's parts of the script. And you've got that continuation of theme that goes out with the film. So that's maybe why it helps soak into popular culture more. But as you said, the Elmer Bernstein score is just so good.
Even just that little do, do, do. I'm not doing it very well.
That's is it Ons Martino you call it? It's like kind of like a keyboard, 19th
like an
century instrument.
Early electronic
Yes,
type.
it sounds like a theremin essentially,
awesome.
but it's a keyboard. That's what Bernstein used to get that sort of ethereal, ghostly effect. Again, it becomes like synonymous. As soon as you hear it, it's like the Psycho.
Yeah.
That kind of arpeggiated
which they got
strings.
by reverse bowing.
Exactly, arpeggiated strings in reverse. And then, you know, like this one is just that theremin type sound. You get it right from the very first part, you know, into the
and
library.
As soon as you hear it, it makes you so excited just hearing it.
But it's such a full orchestral score. And I think Reitman talked a little bit about how there's a lot of bass in it, a lot of drive,
a
lot of brass, and he was one of the composers who really knew how to use brass to full effect. And you get that in any sort of great heroic film.
Yeah, I love it.
Heroic scores are built built on those brass fanfares, you know, and like kind of driving drumming, and this is no exception. But there is also these cool themes. There's a lot of sort of thematics in there. You know, like Dana's theme, and you've got like a kind of Peter and Dana type theme, and all these kind of things. So,
and if you haven't seen the video for Ray Parker Jr.'s Ghostbusters, you need to check that out. It's ridiculous.
It's wonderful.
It's the most 80s thing I've ever seen.
And the thing is, the walk that they do in that video, they all do the kind of Ghostbusters walk, and then they use that for the show, the real Ghostbusters.
That's right.
Because the ghost kind of walks down the street.
Honestly, we used to reenact that. Like, we used to like do that as part of pretending we were the Ghostbusters.
Yeah. That's what you hope for when you create a film, I think, is that it seeps into popular culture and just hits big. There's only certain films that do it. You know, you can think of Jaws, you think of Star Wars, think of like Raiders of the Lost Ark, Ghostbusters, Batman in '89, stuff like that. Things that just are remembered forever because they made such a huge cultural impact as well. And the logos everywhere. The song is everywhere.
Such a strong brand.
You know, the central idea is fairly straightforward, that anybody can get their head around it, but it's also a bit left field, enough to make you interested in going to see it, and it's just some silly premise. It all comes together, and the music in this film is just spectacular.
Let's show this prehistoric bitch how we do things downtown.
So what's the most memorable moment of Ghostbusters for you?
This is a really difficult one because it's so strong in terms of memorable moments. I think probably the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. I just really love, I know he's the baddie and he's going to destroy them and stuff, but he's so cute!
Well, is he really the baddie though?
Well, he's the form of their destroyer.
Exactly,
so.
He's the form of the destructor, so I don't think he's got much of a say in it.
But
big man.
The thing I love the most is when they shoot him for the first time and he gets a little angry face, but it's like this little puffy, cute angry face. Yes. Oh, I absolutely love it. I love that detail.
There's that extra scene that was deleted where you see him after he's been destroyed and his hat drops.
Aww.
I think it's quite cute, but I'm glad they didn't use it because he gets vaporised and his hat would get vaporised at the same time.
Yeah, that's true.
They're a bit silly. I think that's probably why they cut it out. But yeah, it is an amazing sequence. As I said earlier, it's kind of like King Kong / Godzilla, that idea.
I think also because I was so familiar with the cartoon, I think the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man has more of a presence in that.
He does,
as does Slimer.
Well, the thing is, they kind of became like kind of recurring characters as opposed to just like a one and done that he is in the film. And
Slimer, although it wasn't called Slimer in the film, that did come purely from the cartoon, he kind of ends up being like a kind of friend, like what their buddy.
I mean, he's the first ghost they caught as well, so he kind of becomes domesticated, doesn't he? He's like a wee dog.
A wee mascot.
I think that's a really good idea. Memorable moment for me is the whole sequence really on the roof. I mean, again, I know it's the climax and that's kind of like going to be everybody's favourite sequence, but the moment on the roof is fantastic. You know, the way it's composed, the set is incredible, the build quality of it, you know, the lighting, the light show that they put on, the actors are all on point.
Yep.
She looks amazing.
Yep.
The devil dogs look fantastic, you know.
So fun fact, that rooftop scene actually required 50,000 amps of lighting.
That's right.
So powerful that they actually had to shut down all the other stages at Columbia when they were filming it.
That's right. I think they had to put in new generators as well in order to sort of run it.
It's nuts.
It's just crazy.
Also, when I was younger, I found the scene in Dana's apartment with the eggs.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
That's incredible though. Again, from a kind of effects perspective, it's fairly straightforward. Just have a hot plate there.
Yeah.
You know, the eggs are vibrated and they sort of pop out. I love the way they explode though.
Yeah.
It looks so good. And you can see that she is reacting because she's not 100% sure when they're going to pop. She's just there waiting. Like, she knows that's going to happen, but she doesn't know when they're actually going to burst. So she gets a really genuine reaction. And then when she opens the fridge door, again, that is a fantastic sequence. The first time that she comes across Zool and it just says its name, Zool. As the door closes, I think, that's fabulous.
There's something very important I forgot to tell you.
What?
Don't cross the streams. Why? It would be bad.
I'm fuzzy on the whole good-bad thing. What do you mean bad?
Try to imagine all life as you know it stopping instantaneously and every molecule in your body exploding at the speed of light.
Total protonic reversal. Right, that's bad. Okay. All right, important safety tip. Thanks, Egon.
Do you have any favourite quotes? Back off, man. I'm a scientist.
Yeah, that's a good one.
You can use that.
I think I will. I shall from now on. No, I remember what my absolute favourite moment is.
Go.
Listen, do you smell something?
Yes. That is good. That is very good. That is Anvil very good.
That is.
Yeah, that's a great line. and it's so earnest. It's like he doesn't even click. And that's, again, subtle comedy. It's not like an in-your-face joke. It's also out of left field. You don't know where that came from. You're like, what the hell? What? At first, the line will be jarring, but it's only with time. You've seen it a few times and you think it's hilarious. So,
do you have a favourite line in the film?
There's some great lines in there, but if I had to choose one, it would be Egon on top of the building. I'm sorry, Venkman, I'm terrified beyond their capacity for rational thought. I just think it's almost like Crichton-esque.
It is.
You know what I mean? Where he's trying to express himself and say, I'm scared, but he says it in this grand, eloquent way that only his...
Very calmly.
I'm terrified beyond the capacity for rational thought. Instead of saying, I'm shitting myself, which is, I think, what he wanted to say, he says it in that way, and it's just
so
hilarious.
good.
Yeah, that's fantastic, and it just speaks to his character so much. And again, that's about those actors knowing the character voice, knowing what they would say in that situation, and Egon wouldn't say, I'm shitting myself.
But if I'm right, and we can stop this thing, Lenny, you will have saved the lives of millions of registered voters.
So finally, who steals the show? We kind of discussed this right at the very beginning, so it's probably not a surprise.
I think it's definitely Bill Murray.
It's Bill Murray, yeah. For me as well. So there's a lot of fantastic performances in this. This is the very definition of a film that doesn't have a weak part. You know, there's no malfunctions, not from a writing perspective and not from a performance perspective. Even the small parts, people that come in and say one or two lines, they're brilliant as well.
Yeah.
But Bill Murray just definitely steals the show. I think he probably gets the most screen time out of anybody. And again, he's the one with the personal connection. He's the one who hooks up with Dana, and at the end, he's the one with the most to lose. So by that kind of internal logic, then he is probably going to be the most prominent character and probably the hero, if you consider it like that.
Yeah.
But it's just his line delivery, his mannerisms, his demeanour, everything about it is just fantastic. And it's just Bill Murray being Bill Murray again, like we talked about. That authenticity that comes from someone just kind of being themselves almost.
Yeah, Bill Murray does a really good job. I mean, he actually kind of semi-retired after this film. He didn't do it. He moved to Paris, and he didn't do another film again until Scrooged.
Oh, that's another classic.
That's one of my favourites.
Oh my God, I love Scrooged. That's a Christmas favourite. Yeah, you're right. So I think it was because of the Razor's Edge. It was a film that he wrote, I think, and starred in, and it was a bit of a flop.
Oh dear.
So he's always been a fairly private guy, I think, Bill Murray. Never one for the limelight. So it kind of suits who he is to just disappear. But damn, he knows how to pick projects. Like Ghostbusters and then Scrooged. Whipped. That's a great duo.
Maybe now you'll never slime a guy with a positron collider, huh?
So that wraps up our retrospective on Ghostbusters. This has been quite a long one, but there's just so much to talk about in this film. We could probably have extended this one into like 10 hours worth. There's just so much background information, and you could tear it apart scene by scene and just find new things to chat about. But it's been fantastic just going over this. This has been one of the kind of holy grail films that we've been kind of holding back until we felt a bit more comfortable, and now it's time to unleash it. So yeah, we hope you enjoyed this sort of wee look back at Ghostbusters.
And it is actually mind-blowing that people are actually taking the time to listen to us talk nonsense about things that we love. So thanks again for your time and your support. And if you do feel like leaving us a wee review, that would help us out massively.
So don't forget, you can find us on Facebook and Twitter. Just search for Deckard Unicorn, and we've also got our YouTube channel where we review movies, TV shows and all that kind of stuff. So head on over there and subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see some of that content. But thanks once again for listening. We'll see you again next week with another episode. Until then, just remember,
if someone asks you if you are a god, you say yes.